The night over the forbidden forest was quiet in the way that made the hairs on a person's arms rise. The trees stood still. The air felt cold and heavy, even though there was no wind. Then the sky tore. It did not tear like cloth. It tore like a wrong door, opening where no door should be. A thin black line appeared above the tree line. It widened fast, like something pulling it apart from both sides. A man fell out of it. He dropped without panic. He turned in the air once, like his body already knew how to land. He hit the ground on the balls of his feet with a soft thud. Knees bent, hands open. No stumble. No surprise. Toji Fushiguro lifted his head and listened. No shouting. No sirens. Just the forest. Just the faint sounds of distant life. He stood up and rolled his shoulders once. His clothes were dark and plain. His face was calm. Almost bored. The scars on his mouth did not change his expression. His eyes moved from tree to tree, counting angles, counting distance, counting possible threats. He reached behind his back and checked his gear by touch. A short, dark, spear-like weapon. A blade. A long chain wrapped tight. Tools that did not belong to this world. He took one step, then stopped again. Something moved between the trees. Toji did not look scared. He looked annoyed, like someone had interrupted him in the middle of work. A creature slid out of the shadows on long limbs. Its skin looked pale in the moonlight. Its eyes were too bright. It made a low sound that was not quite a growl. Toji watched it for half a second. "Not human," he said, voice low. The creature sprang. Toji moved first. It was not a big motion. He shifted his weight. He slipped to the side. The creature's claws tore through empty air. Before it could turn, Toji's hand snapped forward. Metal flashed once. The creature hit the ground and skidded in the dirt. It tried to get back up, but its legs did not listen right. Toji stood over it for one breath, expression unchanged, then stepped away like it was already finished. In the distance, Hogwarts reacted. The castle's magic felt something it did not understand. Hidden wards rippled across walls and towers like a silent alarm. A few windows flared with light. Somewhere inside, a bell chimed once, then stopped, like it wasn't sure it should keep ringing. Toji's head tilted. He could feel it. Not like cursed energy. Not like the sense he used back home, but like pressure in the air. Rules, barriers, the feeling of a place that did not want strangers. "A big cage," he murmured. Footsteps crunched on leaves. A pair of students, out too late, were edging along the forest path. Their voices were small and scared, the kind of talking people do when they hope it keeps the dark away. They saw the pale creature on the ground. Then they saw the man. One of them made a sound like a gasp that got stuck in their throat. Toji turned his head. His eyes met theirs for a heartbeat. The students froze. They had seen older students duel with wands. They had seen teachers turn desks into animals and back again. But this man wasn't holding a wand. He wasn't wearing school robes. He was not even breathing hard. He was just there. Toji looked at them, then looked past them, toward the castle. He did not chase. He did not speak again. He simply took one step backward into the shadow of a tree, and he vanished. The students ran. They did not stop until the castle gates were close and warm light spilled on them. They tripped over their own feet and burst into the entry hall, shouting about a man in the forest. Far behind them, Toji moved through the trees like a ghost. He kept low. He used the dark. He used silence. His eyes tracked the castle as if it was a target. He was not impressed by the size. He was impressed by the layers. Too many eyes, he thought. Too many rules. He reached into his pocket and took out a small coin. Not a wizard coin, not a galleon. A plain coin from a world that was now far away. He flipped it once, caught it, and sighed. "New place," he said softly. "Same problem." He put the coin away and started walking, slow and careful, toward the edge of the castle's land. Then the cold got worse. Not weather cold. Something else. A darkness floated between two trees like a moving shadow. It glided rather than walked. Its shape was like a person in a torn cloak, but it was wrong in a way Toji could feel in his bones. The air around it felt like fear. The thing drifted closer. Toji did not run. He did not reach for a wand he did not have. He simply watched. The creature stopped. It hovered there, as if it had met something it could not understand. Toji's eyes narrowed just a little. For the first time since he arrived, something in this world looked at him and hesitated. Albus Dumbledore listened without interrupting. The two students sat in chairs in his office, still shaking. One of them kept rubbing their hands on their robes like it would wipe away what they had seen. "A man," the first student said, "in the forest. He wasn't like anyone." "He had a weapon," the second said quickly. "Not a wand, like a spear." McGonagall stood stiff near the window, lips pressed into a thin line. Her eyes were sharp with worry. Severus Snape leaned against the wall, arms folded. His face showed nothing, but his gaze was locked on the students, as if he was weighing every word. Dumbledore's blue eyes flicked to Fawkes on the perch, then back to the students. "You did well to come here," he said gently. "You are safe now." The students nodded, but they did not look convinced. When they were taken away to rest, the room fell quiet. Dumbledore turned to the others. "The wards reacted," McGonagall said. "Not like they do for a student out of bed, not like they do for a troll. They stuttered." Snape's voice was soft and sharp. "Because it cannot identify him. That," Dumbledore said, "is what troubles me." He walked to the desk and placed a hand on a stack of parchment. He had already asked the castle to run its quiet checks. He had already sent portraits to look. He had already whispered to the walls. The answers were strange. No name, no house, no bloodline recorded, no magic signature that matched anything Hogwarts knew. "It is like trying to catch smoke," McGonagall said. "It is worse," Snape replied. "Smoke leaves a smell." Dumbledore gave Snape a long look. "You believe he is here to harm us?" "I believe," Snape said, "that anyone who enters Hogwarts without being seen has chosen to break our rules. That is enough." McGonagall nodded once. "Children live here." "And yet," Dumbledore said, voice calm, "the students who saw him are alive." Snape's eyes narrowed. "That proves nothing." Dumbledore moved to the window. Below, the castle grounds were peaceful. Lanterns burned along paths. The lake was dark and smooth. It looked safe. Dumbledore knew better than to trust appearances. "We will not panic," Dumbledore said. "We will not send teachers running into the forest swinging spells." McGonagall's jaw tightened. "We must protect the school." "Of course," Dumbledore said. "We will protect the school, but we will do it wisely." Snape pushed off the wall. "Wisely means traps." McGonagall frowned. "Severus, wisely," Snape continued, "means assuming he is dangerous until proven otherwise. We strengthen the corridors. We place silent alarms. We move patrols so he cannot predict them." Dumbledore nodded slowly. "Yes. And we also try to understand why he is here." Snape gave a short, humorless breath. "Because he wants something." McGonagall spoke, voice low. "Or because someone sent him." That idea hung in the air like a heavy cloak. Dumbledore turned back to the desk. He tapped a finger on the wood, thinking. "We will begin with what we know," he said. "A man. A weapon. No wand, no trace we can read, and a castle that cannot name him. Snape's eyes were cold. Then we treat him as an intruder with skill, not a lost traveler. Dumbledore nodded again. Agreed. McGonagall leaned forward. What about the Ministry? Snape's mouth curled slightly. They will hear. They always hear. Someone will whisper, unknown threat, and they will come with chains and speeches. Dumbledore's expression did not change, but his eyes sharpened. Then we will be careful what they hear from us. McGonagall looked uneasy. Albus, if it is connected to you-know-who, Dumbledore lifted a hand. We don't know that yet. But even as he said it, Dumbledore felt it. The same quiet sense he had learned to trust over years of war. A piece had moved on the board. Far away, in darkness that did not belong to Hogwarts, another mind also noticed. A cold presence touched the edge of the world like a finger-testing glass. Voldemort did not see the intruder's face. He did not know his name, but he felt an empty space where magic should have been, and he hated empty spaces. Toji slipped into the castle the way he slipped into guarded mansions and sealed temples back home. He did not rush. He waited. He watched patrols from the shadows. He listened to footsteps. He studied how the moving staircases changed. He learned which suits of armor were real guards and which were just decoration. The castle was alive in a way buildings should not be. Hallways shifted. Doors moved. Paintings watched. Toji didn't like that. Too many witnesses, he thought. Too many mouths. But he also saw weaknesses. A teacher's attention always went to where they expected trouble. Students followed habits. Even the castle had patterns, once you stayed long enough. Toji moved when the pattern opened. He slid into a corridor near a classroom, pressed flat behind a stone pillar. A group of older students walked by, laughing quietly. Their wands were out, lighting the floor with soft sparks. Toji's eyes tracked them, then shifted to the far end of the corridor. A single adult stood there, black robes, pale skin. A face like a blade. Snape. Toji felt the man's attention before the man looked his way. Not magic, just the sharp focus of someone who expected betrayal. Snape's eyes moved to the pillar. Toji did not flinch. He stayed still. His breathing slowed until it was almost nothing. Snape raised his wand. Revelio, Snape said, voice low. The air shimmered. Toji didn't vanish the way an invisible wizard might. He simply wasn't where the spell expected a hidden wizard to be. He was flesh and bone, pressed tight against stone, controlling his presence. Snape's brow furrowed. Toji waited, then moved. It was one step, fast and silent, from the pillar to a hanging tapestry. His hand caught the cloth, pulled it aside, and he slipped behind it. Snape's wand snapped toward the tapestry. Stupefy! Red light shot down the corridor. Toji was already moving again. He dove low, rolling under the spell as it cracked the wall. Stone burst. Dust filled the air. Students shrieked in the distance. Toji came up on one knee behind a suit of armor. He did not panic. He watched how fast the spell traveled. He watched the wand angle. He watched Snape's stance. He judged. Fast, Toji thought, but he has to aim. Snape stepped forward, cloak sweeping like a shadow. Show yourself. Toji almost smiled. Almost. He stayed silent. Snape's eyes flicked. He cast again, not a direct attack this time, but a wide sweep that made chains of light lace the corridor, looking for a living body to bind. Toji moved between the lines like he was walking through falling rain. A line grazed his sleeve. His skin prickled. Not pain. Pressure. Like being pushed by invisible hands. To trap, Toji thought, not just hit. He did not let it touch him again. In one clean motion, He threw a small metal piece, just a tool, not magic, down the corridor. It hit the floor with a sharp ring. Snape's eye snapped to it for a fraction of a second. That fraction was enough. Toji sprinted the opposite way, feet barely touching the stone. He vaulted over a bench, slid around a corner, and vanished into a side passage that shouldn't have been there. Snape reached the corner and stopped. The corridor was empty. Distantly, the castle's wards pulsed again, like a heartbeat skipping. Snape stood still, breathing controlled. His eyes were hard. He's trained, Snape thought. He's not lost. He turned on his heel and strode back toward the staff area, already planning. The next morning, the Great Hall buzzed with rumors. Harry tried to listen without looking like he was listening. Students leaned in close, whispering about a forest killer, about a wandless man, about claw marks and broken stone. Ron looked pale. "It's like a Death Eater," he said. "But without a wand, that's worse. At least with a wand you know what they're doing." Hermione's eyes were bright with focus, not fear. "Not worse," she whispered back. "Different. If the wards can't identify him, that means the magic is confused. That is the problem." Harry stared at the teacher's table. Dumbledore looked calm as always. McGonagall looked like she had not slept. Snape's face was stone. Harry leaned closer to Hermione. "Do you think it's him?" Hermione understood what he meant without him saying the name. "I don't know," she said quickly. "But the Dementors came last time because the Ministry allowed them. If they come again, that's politics, not just monsters." Ron made a noise. "Politics are worse than monsters." Hermione elbowed him lightly. "Ron." Harry's scar did not hurt. That was the strange part. Something felt wrong, but not like Voldemort, like a different kind of danger. Above them, the ceiling showed a bright sky. It looked safe. Harry did not feel safe. By afternoon, the ministry pressure arrived like a storm behind a closed door. It began with an owl, then two, then a visitor at the gates, demanding a meeting, demanding reports. Dumbledore met it with a calm smile and careful words. He did not lie. He simply did not give them everything, because he knew what fear did to people with power. Fear made them grab. Fear made them break things they did not understand. Snape did not care about fear. He cared about control. He stood in the staff room, laying out parchment and drawing simple maps of corridors. "He has patterns," Snape said. "Everyone does. We will find his." McGonagall crossed her arms. "And if his pattern is to kill?" Snape's eyes flicked up. "Then we stop him." Dumbledore watched them both, then spoke softly. "If he wanted to kill students, we would already be burying children." Snape's mouth tightened. "Or he is waiting." That was the fear under it. Not that the man was unstoppable, but that he was patient. Toji watched Hogwarts from places no student looked. High beams, dark corners, the top of an old staircase when the portraits were asleep. He listened to the castle breathe. He listened to the students laugh. He did not feel guilt. That was not his way. But he did feel something else, thin and sharp. Annoyance. Because this world was loud with rules, but the rules felt childish. He had lived under worse. He had fought monsters that ate cities. Here, people waved sticks and spoke words and believed that made them safe. Toji rolled his shoulder again and checked his coin. He still had no way home, and no one had paid him. So, he thought, what's the job? He had survived by making chaos useful. If this place had power, then someone would want to buy him. Toji's eyes narrowed slightly. He waited for the offer. The offer came, just not with a polite knock. It came with cold. The first sign was the sky over the lake turning gray in the middle of the day. The second sign was the way students started shivering, even in warm halls. The third sign was the scream. A group of students came running from a corridor near a side exit, faces white. Teachers surged forward, wands came out. A black shape floated into view, and the whole hall fell silent. A Dementor. It drifted like a cloud of fear, its ragged cloak dragging the air down with it. Then another appeared behind it. Then another. They were not supposed to be here. Not again. Not at Hogwarts. McGonagall's voice cut through the panic. Back! All of you! Back! Teachers pushed students behind them. Patronuses burst into the air. Bright animals made of light that lunged at the Dementors. The Dementors recoiled, but they didn't flee. More shadows gathered at the doors. Outside, the grounds darkened as if the sun had been covered. Harry's chest tightened. He had felt Dementors before. The way they stole warmth. The way they stole hope. His legs wanted to stop working. Hermione grabbed his sleeve. Harry, breathe. Breathe. Ron swallowed hard. Why are they here? Who let them in? Harry's eyes snapped toward the entrance. Through the swirl of cold, masked figures moved. Black robes, silver masks, Death Eaters. They used the Dementors like a shield. Students of Hogwarts, one called, voice loud and cruel. Come out and see what happens when the old man loses control. Spells fired, lights flashed, stone cracked. The teachers formed a line, fighting hard. But they were protecting children. They couldn't chase. They couldn't break formation. The Death Eaters pushed forward, laughing behind masks. And in the shadows near a side stairwell, Toji watched. He didn't look scared. He looked irritated. Too loud, he thought. Too messy. A Dementor drifted toward a cluster of younger students who had stumbled. One girl fell, trying to crawl backward, eyes wide. A teacher shouted, but the line was busy. The Dementor lowered its hood. Harry felt his stomach drop. He knew what was coming. Then something blurred past. Toji moved like a shot. He crossed the distance so fast it looked like he had teleported. He slid between the girl and the Dementor with a simple step, body low, shoulders loose. The Dementor's cold pressed in. Toji didn't freeze. He didn't sob. He didn't fall to his knees like Harry had once. He just stared into the darkness under the hood, eyes hard. For a moment, the Dementor hesitated again, like it did in the forest. Toji's hand snapped to his weapon. A short, dark, spear-like blade appeared in his grip. It looked plain. But the air around it felt sharp, like it wanted to cut more than skin. He slashed upward. The spear tore through the Dementor's cloak, not like a spell pushing it away, not like light scaring it off. This was damage. The Dementor jerked back as if it had been stabbed in something deep and real. A sound like a wet gasp filled the air, and several students screamed. Hermione's mouth fell open. "That's not possible," she whispered. Ron pointed with a shaking hand. "That's the man! That's him!" Harry stared, heart pounding. He had seen Patronuses. He had seen powerful magic. But he had never seen someone hurt a Dementor like that with a weapon. The Death Eaters saw it too. One of them stepped forward, voice rising with excitement. "Oi, you! The wandless one!" Toji did not look at them yet. He looked down at the girl behind him. She was frozen, tears on her cheeks. "Move," he said, short and flat. She scrambled away. Then Toji turned. He faced the Death Eaters with the same expression he used for monsters. Not hatred, not fear. Assessment. One of the Death Eaters spread his arms as if welcoming a guest. "You're not one of them. You're not one of us. That's fine. We pay well." Toji's eyes flicked to the man's wand, then to the mask, then to the stance. He heard the tone under the words. Control. Ownership. Toji's lips twitched, almost a smile. "How much?" he asked. The Death Eater laughed. "As much as you want. You like killing, don't you?" Toji tilted his head. "I like finishing." A spell fired toward him, fast and bright. Toji shifted half a step and the spell missed, slamming into a stone pillar. Pieces burst. Dust flew. The Death Eater's laugh stopped. Toji moved. He did not charge straight. He cut an angle, using the chaos, slipping between two spells like he could see their path before they existed. McGonagall shouted, "Who is he?" Snape's eyes tracked Toji like a hawk tracks a rabbit. "Trouble," he said softly. "Trouble with legs." Dumbledore appeared at the far end of the hall, calm and swift, wand raised. His voice carried without shouting. "Enough!" A wave of magic rolled outward. Not a simple spell. A layered force that pushed students back, steadied fallen stones, and made the air clear for half a second. Even Toji felt it. Pressure, like a hand trying to press him into the floor. He did not fall. He planted his feet. Dumbledore's eyes narrowed just a little. He had expected fear or resistance or confusion. Not this. The Death Eaters hesitated. They did not want to fight Dumbledore head-on. They wanted panic. They wanted easy targets. Toji was not an easy target. A Dementor lunged again, angry now, drawn to the strongest fear in the room. It chose Harry. Harry's breath caught. The hall dimmed at the edges, his ears filled with screams that were not there. He tried to lift his wand. His arm felt heavy. Then Toji was there again. He moved between Harry and the Dementor, faster than Harry could blink. Toji's shoulder clipped Harry's chest, pushing him back hard, like moving a piece off a board. Harry stumbled, but stayed on his feet. Toji did not say sorry. He slashed again. The blade cut the Dementor's cloak, and the creature recoiled, as if wounded in a way Patronus light didn't do. It didn't just flee. It shook, like something inside it hurt. Toji's eyes stayed cold. "You're annoying," he said to it, like it was a pest. The Death Eater from before shouted again, louder now, desperate. "Join us. We can give you targets. We can give you freedom." Toji did not answer. He threw his chain. The metal snapped out in a straight line, fast and precise. It wrapped around the Death Eater's wand arm before the man could react. Toji yanked once. The Death Eater flew forward, crashing into the stone floor. His wand skittered away. Gasps rippled through the hall. Ron whispered, He just did that." Hermione's mind raced. His movement. It's like he knows what they will do before they do it. Snape's mouth was tight. No, he reads them. Like an animal reads a hunter. McGonagall fired a spell at another Death Eater, transforming part of the floor into a barrier that shoved them back. Teachers pushed the line forward now that students were behind cover. Dumbledore's wand moved in calm arcs, precise and terrifying. Golden ropes of magic snapped around one attacker. Another was thrown backward into a wall, pinned without being killed. Dumbledore was powerful. Toji was different. One was a storm of magic. The other was a knife in the dark. The Death Eaters began to retreat. They did not leave because they were beaten into the ground. They left because they got what they wanted. They had seen him. They had tested him. And they now knew he could hurt things that should not be touchable. As they backed toward the doors, a voice echoed through the hall, cold with satisfaction. This changes everything. The Dementors drifted back with them, still snarling with silent hunger, but wary now. They kept distance from the man with the spear. Toji did not chase into the open grounds. He stood at the edge of the hall, shoulders relaxed, weapon lowered, eyes watching like he was already thinking about the next move. Dumbledore stepped closer, not rushing, not threatening. His gaze was steady. The cold in the air began to fade as the Dementors withdrew. Students peeked from behind pillars. Teachers lowered wands, but not fully. Everyone looked at Toji, a man without a wand, a man who had cut a Dementor, a man the castle could not name. Toji glanced around at the broken stone, the frightened children, the teachers with tight faces. Then his eyes settled on Dumbledore. He spoke as if they were in an empty room, not a battlefield. "Someone started a fight on your land," Toji said. "That usually costs extra." For a second, in the middle of fear and damage, a few students blinked, like they weren't sure they heard him right. Ron's voice came out in a strangled whisper. "He's asking for money." Hermione didn't look away from Toji. "He's not joking." Dumbledore's mouth curved into the smallest hint of a smile, the kind he used when danger was close, but a choice still existed. "Then we must speak," Dumbledore said quietly, "because I believe you have questions as well." Toji's eyes stayed flat. "I do." Outside, beyond the castle walls, the retreating Death Eaters vanished into the gray. And far beyond them, in a place of darkness and plans, Voldemort felt the report settle into his mind like a new knife. A weapon had arrived, one that did not answer to magic, one that could not be easily controlled. Voldemort's hate sharpened into focus. "Find him," Voldemort whispered into the dark, "before my enemies learn how to use him first." The meeting did not happen in the Great Hall. Dumbledore did not like turning a crowded room into a cage. Too many eyes, too many ears, too many frightened children who would remember every sharp word. So he led the wandless man through a side corridor, past suits of armor and sleeping portraits, to a small office with a round window and a crackling fire. Toji walked like he owned the space. He did not stare and wonder at moving paintings. He did not flinch at the stairs shifting behind him. He just watched angles and exits. His gaze touched every shadow like it might hide a knife. McGonagall stayed near the door, stiff and ready. Snape stayed one step farther back, wand loose at his side. Not raised, not lowered. Like a snake that had not decided if it would bite. Dumbledore offered a chair. Toji looked at it, then leaned against the wall instead. "Name?" Dumbledore asked. Toji's eyes moved to Dumbledore's wand hand, then to his face. "Depends," he said. "Who's asking, and what's the pay?" McGonagall's mouth tightened. "This is Hogwarts. We don't—" "We do," Dumbledore said gently, cutting her off without raising his voice. "We pay our staff, Minerva." Toji's lips twitched. It was not a smile. It was the smallest sign of interest. Dumbledore's tone stayed calm. "You are not from here." Toji didn't deny it. He didn't confirm it either. He let silence sit there, like a test. Snape broke it. "You cut a Dementor." Toji's gaze flicked to Snape. "It got in my way." "That is not an answer," Snape said. Toji shrugged once. "It's the only one you're getting." McGonagall took a sharp breath, but Dumbledore lifted a hand again. "We are grateful you moved," he said, and his eyes held steady on Toji. A student might have been lost. Toji didn't react to gratitude. He reacted to the word lost, like it was a type of problem he understood. Dumbledore continued. "But now you are in a school. Children live here. So we must set rules." Toji's eyes cooled. "Rules." "Yes," McGonagall said, firm. "No stalking hallways, no lurking near dormitories, no violence." Toji let out a quiet sound, halfway between a laugh and a breath. "You want a killer to promise no violence." Snape's wand rose a fraction. Toji didn't move. He didn't need to. His body stayed loose. Ready. Dumbledore spoke before the moment could snap. "We want you to choose," he said. "To stay away from children." That landed differently. Not a command, a request with weight. Toji stared at Dumbledore for a long beat. Then he said, "Fine." McGonagall blinked. Snape's eyes narrowed harder, like he didn't trust how easy it was. To be clear, Toji added, I'm not doing it because you asked nicely. I'm doing it because killing kids doesn't pay, and it makes everyone noisy. McGonagall looked like she wanted to argue. Dumbledore simply nodded. That is practical. Toji's gaze slid to the fire. Now, how do I leave? That, Dumbledore said, we do not know. Toji's jaw tightened for the first time. Not anger, something sharper. The irritation of being stuck. Snape's voice was soft. So you admit you are trapped. Toji glanced at him. I admit this place is a maze. Dumbledore took a slow breath. If you work with us, we may find a way to send you home. Toji's eyes stayed flat. Work. For free? Dumbledore's smile was small. No. McGonagall's head turned. Albus, we cannot pretend he will vanish, Dumbledore said, still calm. We can either watch him from a distance and hope he stays bored, or we can speak plainly and give him a reason to stay on the right side of the line. Snape's stare did not soften. And if his idea of the right side is different from ours? Toji looked between them like he was watching people argue over a broken tool. You talk too much. Then he pushed off the wall and walked to the door. McGonagall stepped aside, only because Dumbledore nodded once. Toji paused at the doorway and looked back at Dumbledore. If someone brings trouble to your school again, he said, that's extra. And then he was gone. By breakfast the next day, the story had grown teeth. In the Great Hall, whispers ran along the tables like a fast animal. A wandless man, a killer, a ghost, a monster, a hero, a thing that made the Dementors flinch. Harry barely touched his food. Ron kept looking over his shoulder like he expected the man to appear behind him and ask for lunch money. Hermione didn't gossip. She watched. She listened. She collected details like puzzle pieces. He didn't faint, Ron whispered. When the Dementors were there, everyone feels it. Everyone. Hermione's eyes stayed fixed on the teacher's table. Not everyone, she murmured. Some people handle fear differently. Harry rubbed his wrist where Toji had shoved him back. It still ached. Not badly, just enough to remind him how fast it happened. He saved me, Harry said. Ron made a face. He shoved you. He shoved me away from a Dementor, Harry replied. Hermione's voice turned careful, like she was choosing words that wouldn't break. He moved like he knew where the spells would go, she said. That's not luck! Harry looked up again. Snape was watching the room, eyes sharp. McGonagall was speaking to other teachers in low voices. Dumbledore looked calm, but his calm now had edges. Hogwarts looked like a school. It did not feel like one. The ministry arrived in letters before it arrived in person. First came an owl with an official seal and sharp questions. Then another. Then another. Then came Lucius Malfoy. Not openly. Not as a visitor. He was too smart for that. He came as a quiet shadow behind people who had badges and stiff smiles. The minister's people held a meeting near the gates. Dumbledore did not invite them inside the castle. Harry didn't hear what was said, but he heard the tone. He heard the raised voices. He saw McGonagall's rigid posture. He saw Snape's mouth turn into a thin line. Later that day, Hermione found Harry and Ron near the library. They want to take control, she said quickly. The ministry. They're calling it a security issue. Ron snorted. Everything's a security issue when they want to boss Dumbledore around. Hermione leaned closer. They also want the wandless man. Harry's stomach tightened. To arrest him? To study him, Hermione said, eyes dark. And if he doesn't cooperate, then yes, arrest, force, whatever they can call legal. Ron swallowed. But he didn't do anything to us. Hermione's voice dropped. He didn't do anything they can't understand. That's what scares them. In the staff corridors, Snape started treating the castle like a battlefield. He did not chase Toji into the forest. He did not throw spells into empty hallways. He did not waste energy on anger. He prepared. He placed silent markers in dust that only he would notice. He arranged patrol routes with small changes, watching for patterns in what was disturbed and what was untouched. He asked portraits questions in ways that made them uncomfortable. Then he built bait. A false report whispered through the right mouths. A special object kept in a locked room. A tool that could open doors between worlds. A rumor meant to attract someone who wanted escape. Snape didn't know if Toji would take it, but he expected the wandless man to move sooner or later, because boredom made predators hunt. Toji did not hide because he was scared. He hid because it was efficient. He learned the castle's rhythm quickly. He learned when students flooded the halls, when teachers rotated, when the ghosts drifted, when the paintings gossiped. He found places no one used. A narrow gap behind an old tapestry, a cold ledge above a stairwell, a quiet corner in the attic where broken furniture slept under sheets. In those places, he listened. He listened to children talk about homework, like homework was the whole world. He listened to older students talk about dating and Quidditch and rival houses. He listened to fear, too. Fear of the Dark Lord. Fear of Dementors. Fear of being taken in the night. Toji didn't care about their fear the way a hero would. He cared about it like a weather report. Fear made people act stupid. Fear made people move in groups. Fear made doors close at the wrong time. Fear was messy, and Toji hated mess. He touched the coin in his pocket again and felt the problem he couldn't punch. No way out, no client, no job. Just a castle full of magic that kept trying and failing to decide what he was. He didn't like being a question mark. He liked being a blade with a label. That label arrived in a way only Hogwarts could manage, in the middle of quiet. Hermione found him first, not because she was braver than everyone else, because she was more stubborn. She had followed small clues, dust patterns, the way certain hallways felt colder for no reason, the way portraits would pause mid-sentence and glance into darkness. One evening, after dinner, she walked alone with a book pressed to her chest and her wand ready, but not raised. She stopped near an empty corridor where a suit of armor stood slightly crooked. "Hello," she said, voice steady. Silence answered her. Hermione's throat tightened, but she didn't run. "I know you're there," she said. "You don't have to be. But you are." A shadow shifted near the ceiling beam. Then Toji dropped down behind her like a falling knife. Hermione spun with her wand up, but Toji's hand was already around her wrist, not crushing, not gentle, just complete control. Her wand pointed at the wall. Hermione froze, breath shallow. Her heart hammered so hard she thought he would hear it. Toji leaned in slightly, eyes bored. "You're either brave," he said, "or stupid." Hermione swallowed. "I'm trying to understand." "To understand what?" Toji asked. "You," Hermione said, and her voice shook only a little. "The Dementors reacted to you. The wards don't read you. Spells miss you in ways they shouldn't." Toji loosened his grip a fraction, like her words amused him. Hermione forced herself to keep talking. "Are you a wizard?" Toji's eyes narrowed as if the word wizard was meaningless. "No." "A muggle?" she tried. Toji's mouth twitched again. "No." Hermione's brain ran fast. "So you're from somewhere else?" Toji didn't answer. Hermione took that as the closest thing to yes she would get. "Then you want to go home." Toji stared at her a long beat. Then he released her wrist. Hermione pulled her arm back but didn't flee. Toji's voice stayed flat. "Everyone wants something. Hermione nodded slowly. What do you want? Toji's eyes flicked down to the book in her hands. Hermione held it up quickly. This is a book about protective magic, about barriers and wards. I thought, maybe it would help. Toji stared at it like it was a brick. I don't read your spell books. Hermione flushed, but she kept her ground. Then what do you do? Toji's answer was simple. I work. Hermione hesitated. For money? To live, Toji said. Hermione looked at him, really looked. A man who moved like a weapon. A man who spoke like feelings were extra weight. A man who didn't belong in a school full of warm light and noisy children. You can't just take jobs here, Hermione said. People will try to use you. Toji stepped back into the shadow, already losing interest. Let them try. Before he vanished, Hermione blurted, Someone from the ministry is asking questions about you. Toji paused. Hermione pressed. Fast. They don't want to help you. They want to own you. Toji turned his head slightly. Own. His voice was calm, but something dangerous slid under it, like a blade being drawn an inch from its sheath. Then he was gone. Hermione stood in the corridor shaking, not from cold, but from the simple fact that she had just warned a monster about hunters, and she couldn't tell which side she was on. Lucius Malfoy did not knock on Toji's door. He did not even look for him directly. Lucius understood the value of distance. He understood that fear made people sloppy, but greed made them predictable. So he sent a message the way people in dark corners always did. A small pouch of gold appeared on a stone ledge near an unused staircase. Not wizard coins Hermione recognized. Strange, heavy pieces. Old currency. Enough to say, I can pay you even in a world you don't understand. Beside it sat a slip of parchment. No signature. Just a line written in neat, elegant ink. A job. A target. A path out. Meet where the walls forget to watch. Toji found it before Snape did. He didn't snatch the gold like a starving man. He weighed it in his hand, tested it with his thumb. Real value. Real intention. His eyes moved to the words again. A path out, he murmured. That was the hook. Not the money. Not the target. The promise of an exit. Toji slipped the pouch into his pocket. He left the note behind. He didn't need paper to remember. In a place far from Hogwarts, in a room where candles burned green and the air smelled like old hatred, Voldemort listened. A Death Eater knelt, trembling as he spoke. No wand, my lord. He moved faster than spells, and he hurt the Dementors. Hurt them. Voldemort's eyes did not widen. He did not shout. His anger was colder than shouting. Is he loyal? Voldemort asked. We don't know. That, Voldemort said softly, is unacceptable. Lucius stepped forward smoothly. My lord, he said, voice respectful. Some men have only one loyalty. Payment. Voldemort's gaze slid to Lucius like a knife. And you believe you can purchase a storm? Lucius bowed his head. I believe I can aim it. Voldemort's mouth curved, not in humor, but in cruelty. Then aim it, Lucius. He leaned forward slightly, voice lowering. But remember, if it turns on you, I will not save you. Lucius's smile did not move. Of course, my lord. Inside, his stomach tightened, because even Lucius Malfoy could feel it now. This wandless man was not a tool that fit in a hand. He was a blade that cut the hand that held it. The next week at Hogwarts felt like living inside a held breath. Teachers doubled patrols. Students were warned to stay in groups. The grounds were watched. And somewhere in the cracks of the castle, Toji moved with quiet purpose now. He wasn't wandering. He was hunting. Not prey. A path. Snape noticed the change. He saw how certain patrol routes were tested, how certain doors were checked, how certain places were watched from far away. "He has chosen a direction," Snape told Dumbledore that evening. Dumbledore's eyes stayed calm, but his fingers tapped once on the desk. "Toward what?" Snape's voice was tight. "Toward whoever thinks they can buy him." Dumbledore went still. In war, the worst thing was not a strong enemy. It was an unknown ally. Toji left Hogwarts without saying goodbye. He didn't climb over a wall like a student sneaking out. He didn't smash through wards like a fool. He waited for a supply carriage to roll near the gates. He stepped into its shadow at the perfect moment. He moved with it, and when it reached the edge of the protective lines, he slipped away like smoke. He followed the road to Hogsmeade. From there, he followed people. He didn't need to know the names of shops. He didn't care about suites and windows. He watched which adults walked like they carried authority, which ones used fireplaces in the back rooms, which ones spoke in careful tones. He caught a wizard leaving a pub's private room and followed him down a narrow alley. When the man stopped to light a pipe, Toji stepped behind him and put a hand over his mouth. No struggle lasted more than a breath. Toji didn't kill him. Killing was loud. Killing made questions. He took what he needed, a handful of powder from a pouch, a few coins, and the words the wizard mumbled in fear. "The Ministry," the man whispered. Toji released him and vanished before the wizard could even fall. Then Toji stepped into the alley fireplace, threw the powder, and spoke like he had done it all his life. "Ministry of Magic." Green fire swallowed him. The Ministry of Magic was built like a secret that forgot it was a secret. It was loud, with footsteps, papers, and power. Wizards moved with purpose, wands at their sides like badges. Toji stepped out of a fireplace in a side corridor and held still for 1 second, eyes scanning. He felt magic in the walls, in the air, in the floor. It pressed like humidity. He didn't like it. A clerk walked by and glanced at him. The clerk's eyes slid off Toji like he couldn't place him. Toji noticed that too. He moved through the halls without rushing. Not running. Running drew attention. He walked like he belonged, shoulders relaxed, gaze forward. He followed signs until he saw the words he wanted. Department of Mysteries. A guarded door stood at the end of a hall, watched by 2 Aurors. Toji paused around the corner and watched them like he watched guards anywhere. 2 people. Wands. Eyes moving in a pattern. Easy. But magic wasn't just in hands here. It was in the door, in the locks, in the air. Toji needed someone else to open it. So he waited. Minutes later, a man in neat robes approached with a confident stride and a key-like object that glowed faintly. Toji stepped out behind him, close enough that the man's skin prickled. The man turned. Toji's hand struck the side of his neck. The man's body went limp. Toji caught him, lowered him silently, and dragged him into a shadowed nook beside a filing cabinet. Then he took the glowing key. The Aurors at the door noticed none of it. Toji walked forward with the key held low, not proudly, not hidden, like a worker with the right tool. One Auror frowned. "You're not scheduled." Toji stopped at a safe distance. "Emergency check," he said, voice flat. The Auror narrowed his eyes. "Name?" Toji didn't blink. "Late." The Auror's face twisted in annoyance at the non-answer. That was all Toji needed. As the Auror opened his mouth again, Toji flicked the key forward toward the door's lock and moved at the same time. A spell snapped toward him. Toji dropped low, the spell passing over his head and cracking the wall behind. The second Auror shouted, "Intruder!" Toji surged forward. He didn't attack the wand first. He attacked the stance. He kicked the first Auror's knee sideways. The Auror fell with a cry. Toji grabbed his wrist and slammed it into the door, making the wand clatter. The second Auror fired again. Toji twisted, grabbed the fallen wand off the floor, and hurled it like a knife. It didn't pierce flesh. It struck the aura's hand hard enough to numb it. The wand flew away. Toji hit the door with the glowing key. The lock clicked. The door swung open. Toji slipped inside and let it close behind him. He left the auras alive on purpose. Alive people told stories. Stories spread fear. Fear made his client move. The Department of Mysteries felt like a different world inside the world. The air was colder. The light was wrong. The walls absorbed sound. Toji moved down a circular corridor with many identical doors, each one hiding something that felt sharp and old. He could hear his own steps. He hated that. He chose a door at random. Not random, really. The hair on his neck rose near it. The pressure in the air changed. He opened it. Inside was a long room filled with shelves. On the shelves sat small glass spheres, each one glowing with soft light. Toji stepped in carefully. He didn't know what a prophecy was. He didn't know this room had ruined wars. He only knew that the air here felt like a trap. A whisper slid through the room, faint as breath. Not words he understood, more like a promise. Toji's hand went to his blade. Then footsteps sounded behind him. Fast. Multiple. Aurors had followed. And not only aurors. Dark robes moved at the edge of the corridor like ink. Death Eaters. Lucius had not come himself. He wasn't that brave. But his people were here. And they moved like they had permission. A masked wizard stepped into the room and spread his hands like a host. "You came," the Death Eater said, voice pleased. "Good. You want a way out? We want a simple thing." Toji's eyes stayed flat. "Talk." The Death Eater gestured toward the shelves. "Take what we point to. Bring it to us. That sphere. That one." Toji looked where the wand pointed. A single sphere glowed a little brighter than the rest. Toji didn't move toward it. "Why?" he asked. The Death Eater laughed softly. "Because it matters. Because it changes everything." Toji's gaze slid back to him. Not an answer. The Death Eater's voice hardened. "Take it, or we will." Toji moved. He crossed the space in a blink and drove his elbow into the Death Eater's throat. The man choked, stumbled back, and crashed into a shelf. Glass spheres rattled. Toji grabbed the man's wand arm and twisted. The wand snapped. The Death Eater screamed. Then spells filled the room. Red bolts, blue flashes, binding ropes of light. Toji ran through the first wave like he had practiced for this his whole life. He didn't try to tank spells. He didn't try to prove anything. He avoided them. He used shelves as cover. He kicked off a pillar and flipped over a beam of light that would have pinned him. A spell clipped his shoulder and burned like a hot slap. Toji didn't slow. He landed behind an aura and struck once at the base of the skull with a controlled hit. The aura dropped. Another aura fired wide to avoid hitting shelves. That was smart. It still wasn't fast enough. Toji slid under the spell, grabbed the aura's robe, and threw him into a Death Eater. They both crashed into a shelf. Spheres bounced. Toji's eyes flicked to the bright one again. His client wanted it. That meant it had value. He vaulted forward, hand stretching, and a spell hit the shelf above him. The whole row shook. Several spheres fell. Toji twisted away, but one sphere struck the floor and shattered. The sound was small. The effect was not. A voice filled the room, loud, clear, like it was speaking from the air itself, not a person in the room. A recording? A prophecy. Toji didn't understand the words, but everyone else did. Aurors froze. Death Eater stopped firing for half a heartbeat. In that heartbeat, Toji's instinct screamed. This is the real trap, he thought. He grabbed the bright sphere with one hand, then he ran. He sprinted toward the door as spells exploded behind him. A Death Eater shouted, Stop him! Toji didn't stop. He slammed through the doorway into the circular corridor and nearly collided with a small figure crouched low beside the wall. A child, not a toddler, a student age, Hogwarts uniform, eyes wide with fear. Toji's eyes narrowed. Bait, he thought. The child scrambled backward. I didn't. Toji didn't ask questions. He didn't comfort. He didn't waste time. He hooked the child by the back of the robe and yanked them into the safest shadowed nook behind a stone pillar. Spells flashed down the hall and shattered against the wall where the child had been. The child stared at Toji like he was a nightmare that had saved them. Toji hissed, low. Stay. Quiet. The child nodded so fast it was almost painful. Toji stepped out again. Death Eaters poured into the corridor from one side, Aurors from the other. 2 armies, both aiming at him. Toji held the sphere tight, felt its smooth glass under his palm. He glanced left, right, and chose violence like a route on a map. He threw the sphere upward, not to break it, to distract. Every eye followed it for a fraction of a second. Toji surged forward under that fraction and slammed into the nearest Death Eater, driving him into the wall. He snatched the falling sphere out of the air without looking. Then he sprinted down the corridor, zigzagging, forcing spells to miss. An Auror tried a wide-binding spell that flooded the hall. Toji jumped. He ran up the wall for 2 steps, kicked off, and flipped over the glowing net. The Auror's mouth fell open. Toji landed behind him and chopped his shoulder hard enough to numb his arm. Wand dropped. Toji kept moving. The corridor doors began to shift. Some opened on their own as magic reacted to the chaos. One opened into a room with a huge archway draped in a black curtain that moved like it was breathing. The air in that room was wrong. It pulled at the skin. A whisper came from behind the curtain, like the world trying to call people into it. The Death Eater slowed near the doorway, suddenly careful. Aurors hesitated too. Toji didn't hesitate. He stepped in. The moment he crossed the threshold, the whisper hit him harder than anything so far. Not fear, not cold. A pull, like the world was trying to grab the part of him that made him him. Toji's hand tightened on his blade. He stared at the archway. So, this is one of your doors, he thought. Spells flew into the room. Some slammed into the floor. Some fizzled strangely in the heavy air. Toji crouched low and moved along the edge, using the room's strange gravity of attention. A Death Eater shouted, voice shaky, "Don't go near the veil." Toji's eyes flicked to him. Veil, he repeated. A name, a label. Better than nothing. He turned back to the archway and took 1 step closer. The pull increased. The hairs on his arms rose. For a second, the glass sphere in his hand vibrated, as if it recognized the doorway. Then another presence entered the room. Not Aurors. Not Death Eaters. Something pale and wet-looking slid along the ceiling like a spider made of thought. A strange, brain-like thing, floating, trailing thin strands. Hermione would have screamed. Ron would have fainted. Toji just watched it, eyes cool. It dropped. It aimed for his head. Toji sliced. His blade cut through more than flesh. It cut through the thing's feel in the air. The creature recoiled. Strands snapping, and a loud, wet noise echoed. More shapes stirred in the shadows. The room was waking up. Toji realized the truth with a hard clarity. This wasn't just a heist. This was a place full of things even wizards kept locked away, and the fight had opened the locks. Toji's mouth tightened. Annoying. A Death Eater stepped into the doorway, seeing the floating horrors. "What did you do?" Toji didn't answer. He grabbed the sphere, then looked once more at the veil. A path out. Maybe. Or a death trap. Toji didn't fear death, but he didn't walk into unknown doors without payment. Not today. He backed away from the archway and sprinted for the opposite exit as the strange creatures began to drift toward the noise and magic. Aurors and Death Eaters both started to fall back. Spells firing at the wrong targets now as panic snapped their formation. Toji used the confusion like a knife. He slipped through a side corridor, up a staircase, and into a service tunnel. He didn't know the ministry well. He didn't need to. He only needed one way out. He reached a fireplace, threw powder, and spoke the first safe word he remembered from the wizard he had grabbed. Hogsmeade. Green fire swallowed him again. Hours later, Hogwarts felt the ripple. Not the way a bell sounds, more like the way glass trembles before it cracks. Dumbledore stood in his office, hand resting on the back of his chair, eyes distant. Snape stepped in without knocking, cloak moving like dark water. "He's gone," Snape said. Dumbledore didn't ask who. He looked at the instruments on his shelves, at how some spun too fast and others had stopped. "Where?" Dumbledore asked quietly. Snape's eyes were cold. "The Ministry." McGonagall arrived a moment later, face tight. "Albus, there are reports." Dumbledore lifted a hand. "I know." McGonagall swallowed. "He started a war in the Ministry corridors." Snape's voice sharpened. "No, the Ministry started it. He just finished the parts he touched." Dumbledore's gaze lowered, thoughtful, heavy. Somewhere in the distance, a student cried out from a nightmare. Somewhere else, an owl beat its wings against stormy air. The world was shifting around a man who did not belong in it. And the worst part was this. He had not chosen a side. Not yet. He had only chosen a goal, a door, and he had taken something powerful enough to make both the Ministry and Voldemort move faster. In the dark, Voldemort received the first broken report. Not the full story, not the truth, but enough. A sphere was taken. A Death Eater whispered through a trembling mouth. The prophecy room was disturbed. The veil reacted. Something woke up. Voldemort's eyes glittered. A cold smile formed, slow and thin. "So," he murmured, "the storm has found my locked rooms." He leaned back, fingers steepled, voice almost pleased. "Let him run," Voldemort said. "Let him believe he is chasing freedom." His gaze sharpened. "Every door he touches will open something." And in that opening, Voldemort saw opportunity. Because if Toji could cut what magic normally could not touch, then Voldemort could either chain him or build a trap big enough that even a blade like Toji would finally have to stop. In the forest outside Hogwarts, far from the castle lights, Toji sat on a fallen log, turning the glass sphere in his hand. He still didn't know what it said. He didn't care. He cared about what it represented. Leverage. And leverage meant the price just went up. He looked toward the distant glow of Hogwarts on the horizon, then down at the sphere again. "All right," he thought. "Whoever wants this, come pay." 2 weeks passed, and Hogwarts still felt like it was holding its breath. Toji moved like he had always moved. Quiet. Efficient. With no wasted steps. At night, he watched patrol routes from places no one checked. In the early morning, he tested the castle's edges. Not to break them, to understand them. He learned which fences were real and which were for show. He learned how close he could get to a ward before it pushed back. He learned the names of a few spells, only because he heard them shouted so often. He learned another thing, too. People here thought money was either rude or evil. Toji thought that was childish. He sat in the forest one gray afternoon, turning the glass sphere over in his hand. It caught light like a trapped moon. He didn't know what it said. He didn't care what it said. It made powerful people nervous. That was enough. Behind him, a twig snapped. Toji did not turn fast. He turned normal. Slow enough to look harmless. Fast enough to still be ready. Dumbledore stood between the trees, robes neat, wand in his hand, but not pointed. He had not brought a crowd. He had not brought aurors. He had not brought chains. That was either respect or confidence. Toji's eyes narrowed a fraction. You followed me. Dumbledore's expression stayed gentle. I hoped you would allow me to find you. Toji snorted. Same thing. Dumbledore stepped closer, careful not to cross into Toji's reach like a foolish man. There has been trouble, he said. Toji's gaze slid over him. There's always trouble. Yes, Dumbledore said softly. But now it is moving toward children again. Toji held the sphere up. This is about this. It is, Dumbledore said. And it is also about what happened when you entered the ministry. Toji leaned back against the log. They tried to stop me. And you responded, Dumbledore said, choosing his words like stones on a path. Toji's voice stayed flat. They're alive. Dumbledore paused. Many are. That was a warning dressed as kindness. Toji did not flinch. If you are here to lecture me, leave. I am not, Dumbledore replied. He looked at the sphere. That object belongs to a dangerous part of our world. Many people will chase you for it. Toji's eyes were cold. Then they'll come. Good. Dumbledore's gaze lifted. Voldemort has noticed you. The name hit the air like a sudden drop in temperature. Toji didn't react the way most people did. He didn't stiffen. He didn't whisper it like it burned his tongue. He only tilted his head. That's your big one, he said. Yes, Dumbledore answered, and he will try to use you. Toji's mouth twitched. Everyone keeps saying that. Because it is true, Dumbledore said. Toji flipped the sphere once, caught it. Then pay me. McGonagall would have exploded if she heard that. Dumbledore did not. How much? Dumbledore asked. Toji looked him over again. He wasn't counting coins. He was counting value. I want information, Toji said. Real information, not your school rumors. Dumbledore nodded once. What sort? To go home, Toji said. The words came out like a fact, not a plea. Anything you have about tears in space, doors, the veil, anything. Dumbledore's eyes sharpened, just a little. And in exchange? Toji tapped the glass sphere with his thumb. This goes where you want it, or I use it as bait. Either way, it becomes your problem, not mine. But you give me what you know. Dumbledore was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, And what else? Toji's gaze slid toward the distant castle. Your kids stay out of my way. Dumbledore's voice stayed calm. That is already my wish. Toji's eyes narrowed again. And I want one more thing. Dumbledore waited. No leash, Toji said. No orders. You can ask. You can offer. But you don't own me. Dumbledore's face softened in a way that was almost sad. I would never wish to own anyone. Toji watched him closely, as if waiting for the lie to blink. Dumbledore held his gaze without flinching. Finally, Toji stood. Fine, he said. You have a deal. Dumbledore did not smile like he had won. He simply nodded, like he had accepted a hard truth. Then Dumbledore said, There is one more part you should hear. Toji's eyes stayed flat. What? The Ministry believes you are a threat, Dumbledore said. They will come for you, some with fear, some with greed. And if they fail, they will beg Voldemort for help without admitting it. Toji's jaw tightened. So this world is stupid. Dumbledore's eyes held steady. It is human. Toji snorted. Same thing. Dumbledore raised his wand, not in threat. He traced a soft circle in the air, and the space between them shimmered. A thin bubble of silence formed around the two of them. The forest sounds faded. To speak plainly, Dumbledore said, Voldemort's people have already sent messages, not only to you. Toji's eyes sharpened. To who? Dumbledore's voice dropped. To students, to families, to anyone they can frighten. A slow heat moved under Toji's calm. Not kindness, not heroism, something more basic, annoyance. They're using kids as bait, Toji said. Dumbledore nodded. Yes. Toji looked at the sphere again, then at Dumbledore. Then your pay goes up, Toji said. Dumbledore didn't argue. Name your price. Toji's gaze was hard. You tell me everything you know about the Veil, tonight. Dumbledore nodded once. I will. Toji turned his head toward the trees. And you keep your teachers out of my path when it starts. Dumbledore's voice stayed quiet. Will you kill? Toji didn't bother pretending. If they make me. Dumbledore's eyes closed for the smallest moment. When they opened again, they were still gentle. But there was steel behind them now, too. Then let us make sure, Dumbledore said, that the people we wish to protect are not standing in your way. That same night, Severus Snape stood alone in a corridor near the staff stairs, watching a candle flame. It flickered, then steadied. He did not need a special instrument to know danger was moving. He felt it in the way whispers had changed, in the way owls arrived with too perfect timing, in the way the castle wards pulsed more often, like a heart under stress. McGonagall came to him, footsteps crisp. You're pacing, she said. Snape's eyes didn't leave the flame. I'm thinking. McGonagall's voice was sharp. The Ministry sent another letter. They want Aurors inside Hogwarts. Snape's mouth curled. They want control inside Hogwarts. McGonagall's shoulders squared. And the man? Snape didn't say Toji's name. He refused to give the stranger that power yet. He's still here, Snape said. Somewhere. McGonagall lowered her voice. Do you trust him? Snape's eyes slid to her, cold and honest. No. McGonagall's jaw tightened. Then why is Dumbledore speaking with him? Snape's voice was low. Because Dumbledore believes he can steer storms with soft hands. McGonagall's eyes flashed. Albus is not naive. No, Snape agreed. He is hopeful. That can be worse. McGonagall stared at him. You're afraid. Snape's face did not change. I am prepared. Then the candle flame bent sideways, like a breath had pushed it. Snape's wand was in his hand at once. McGonagall's too. They both turned toward the corridor. A shadow moved, and the wandless man stepped out like he had been there the whole time. Toji looked at their wands with mild boredom. Relax. McGonagall didn't lower hers. You're not welcome here. Toji's eyes flicked to her. Your headmaster says otherwise. Snape's voice was sharp. Why are you here? Toji glanced down the corridor, then back. Someone's coming. McGonagall's face hardened. The Ministry? Toji shook his head once. Worse. Snape's eyes narrowed. How do you know? Toji tapped his chest lightly. I'm good at reading danger. Snape's gaze sharpened in a way that almost looked like respect, then vanished. What do you want? Toji's answer was simple. I want to be paid. McGonagall looked like she might explode. Snape didn't. Snape understood transactions. He had lived inside them for years. What is the job? Snape asked. Toji's eyes moved past them, toward the sleeping halls. Keep the kids out of the way, he said, and don't try to trap me during it. Snape's mouth tightened. I haven't decided whether to trap you. Toji's lips twitched. You're slow then. Snape's wand lifted a fraction more. McGonagall's voice went icy. If you threaten a teacher... Toji cut her off without raising his voice. I'm warning you. A pause. Then Snape spoke again, softer. "Who is coming?" Toji's eyes turned flat. "People who think fear is a tool." McGonagall swallowed. "Death Eaters." Toji didn't nod. He didn't need to. Snape's face went even colder. "Where?" Toji looked at him for a long beat. "The edge of your wards," he said. "They're probing, like you did." "They'll find a crack." Snape's gaze sharpened. "And you?" Toji's answer was blunt. "I'll cut the hand that reaches in." McGonagall looked sick at the words. Snape looked like he was doing math. He said, "Albus made a deal with you." Toji shrugged. "He offered. I accepted." Snape's voice was low. "You'll sell him out the moment a better offer arrives." Toji stared at him, then snorted once. "Maybe." McGonagall's grip tightened on her wand. Toji's eyes slid to her, then back to Snape. "But here's the thing," he said. "If your enemy offers me a leash, I don't care how shiny it is. I cut it." Snape held his gaze. For a second, both men looked like they recognized something in each other. Not friendship, not trust, just a shared understanding that the world was cruel and survival had rules. Then Toji stepped back into shadow. "Wake your headmaster," he said. "He'll want to stand in front. You'll want to stand behind. Either way, move." And he was gone. McGonagall exhaled. Sharp. "He's terrifying." Snape's eyes stayed fixed on the empty corridor. "Yes," he said, "and that's why Voldemort wants him." In the dark, Voldemort smiled without warmth. He was not smiling because he believed he could easily win. He was smiling because the board was finally interesting. Lucius Malfoy stood at the side, careful not to step too close. "My lord," Lucius said smoothly. "The creature—" "The man," Voldemort corrected, voice soft and cold. "Do not insult him. Storms don't like being called pets." Lucius bowed his head. "Of course." Voldemort's red eyes gleamed. "He wants a door home." Lucius nodded. "Yes." Voldemort leaned forward slightly. "Then we offer him one." Lucius hesitated. "And if he refuses?" Voldemort's smile sharpened. "Then we show him that his door is locked, unless I choose to unlock it." Lucius swallowed. "How?" Voldemort's fingers traced the air, slow, thoughtful. "We do not try to overpower him head-on," Voldemort said. "We trap him with choices." He looked at Lucius. "Children. Hostages. Promises." Lucius's voice stayed smooth, but his eyes flickered. "He did not harm the students." Voldemort's gaze narrowed. "That is why it will work." Lucius's stomach tightened. Voldemort's voice became almost lazy. "Bring him to the edge of Hogwarts wards, not inside. Not where Dumbledore can control the field." He paused. "And bring something that will make him think he can win." Lucius nodded, though he looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Voldemort's smile faded. "And Lucius," he added, voice turning sharp, "do not offer him to me as if he is a gift." Lucius bowed. "No, my lord." Voldemort's eyes glittered. "Offer him as a mirror, a man without magic, standing between wizards, proving that fear is the real spell." Lucius backed away, careful and quiet. And Voldemort whispered into the dark, "Come then, Blade. Come ask for your price." Harry learned the plan the way he always learned plans. He overheard half of it. He saw the other half in faces. Dumbledore called a small meeting in an unused classroom, not the Great Hall, not the office where portraits could listen. Harry, Hermione, and Ron were there because they had seen too much already. They were also, Dumbledore admitted, very hard to keep out of danger. McGonagall stood with arms crossed. Snape stood in the back like a shadow that hated everyone. And then Toji stepped in through the open window, like gravity didn't matter. Ron made a choking sound. Hermione's eyes went wide but steady. Harry felt his heart pound. He remembered the cold. He remembered the shove. He remembered that the Dementor had stopped. Toji didn't look at them like kids. He looked at them like small, unpredictable animals that might get underfoot. Dumbledore spoke first. "Thank you for coming." Toji's gaze slid to the window, then back. "You said tonight." Dumbledore nodded. "Tonight?" McGonagall's eyes narrowed. "We're not making you a teacher." Toji glanced at her, bored. "Good." Ron blurted. "Are you even allowed in here?" Toji looked at Ron like Ron had spoken in a foreign language. "Allowed?" Hermione quickly said. "He means the rules." Toji's gaze flicked to Hermione. "Rules are for people who can be caught." Snape's voice sliced in. "You can be caught." Toji's eyes slid toward Snape. "Try." Dumbledore raised a hand. Calm. "Enough." He turned to Harry. "Harry, you will listen, and you will not interrupt." Harry swallowed and nodded. Dumbledore continued. "We believe Voldemort will make a move near the wards. Not inside. Near." Snape's voice was cold. "He wants the wandless man away from Dumbledore's direct protection." Toji snorted. "Protection." Dumbledore ignored the tone. "They will likely use fear. Or hostages." Harry's stomach tightened. "Who?" McGonagall answered, grim. "Families. Students outside the castle. People in Hogsmeade." Ron's face went pale. "My family." Hermione grabbed his sleeve hard. "Ron." Toji watched that, eyes unreadable. Dumbledore looked at Toji. "They will offer you something." Toji's gaze stayed flat. "A door." Dumbledore nodded slowly. "Yes." Harry couldn't hold it in. "What do you want?" he asked. Toji looked at him, and for a second Harry felt like he was being measured like a target. Toji answered without warmth. "To leave." Harry's voice came out smaller. "Then why help?" Toji's eyes stayed cold. "Because they're making noise on my path." Snape made a soft sound, almost a laugh. "Honest, at least." Dumbledore said, "He will not be owned by either side." McGonagall's jaw tightened. "That doesn't mean we should trust him." Dumbledore's eyes stayed steady. "No, it means we must plan with the truth." Dumbledore turned to Toji. "You asked about the veil." Toji's attention sharpened. "The veil," Dumbledore said, "is not a door home. It is a doorway to death." Ron whispered, "Brilliant." Toji's face did not change, but something in his eyes went colder. "So the Ministry lied." "They did not lie to you," Snape said. "They lied to themselves, thinking they could control you." Dumbledore continued. "The tear that brought you here is not something we understand. But we have seen such odd tears before. Rare, dangerous, unstable." Toji's jaw worked once. "So, no map." Dumbledore's voice stayed gentle. "No." Toji stared at the floor for a long moment. Then he said, "Then I'll make my own." McGonagall stiffened. "Do not bring that kind of chaos into Hogwarts." Toji's eyes lifted to her. "Chaos already lives here." Hermione swallowed, then said, "You said the veil pulls it. What makes you you?" Toji's gaze flicked to her. "Yeah." Hermione's voice was careful. "Then the tear that brought you here might have a similar pull. Something that grabs what doesn't belong." Toji stared at her. For the first time, his expression shifted slightly, like she had said something useful. Snape noticed too. His eyes narrowed, calculating. Dumbledore spoke again. "Tonight," he said, "we will not chase Voldemort. We will protect those he tries to use." He looked at Toji. "Will you fight?" Toji's voice was blunt. "If they pay." McGonagall bristled. Dumbledore didn't. "You will be paid." Toji nodded once, like the matter was settled. Then he looked at Harry, Hermione, and Ron. "Stay inside," Toji said. Ron swallowed. "We always do." Toji's eyes narrowed. You don't. Harry's cheeks warmed. He wanted to argue. He couldn't. Toji turned away, as if they were no longer part of the problem. Tell me where the crack is, he said to Snape. Snape's eyes flicked. And why would I? Toji's answer was simple. Because if I'm in the wrong place, kids die. Snape went still. McGonagall looked like she hated that Toji had used the simplest weapon. Truth. Snape's voice went low. North Edge, near the old stones by the forest. The wards there are older. Toji nodded. Good. Then he stepped back toward the window. Dumbledore's voice stopped him. One more thing. Toji paused. You asked for a name, Dumbledore said softly. A real name. Toji's eyes slid to him. You still want that? Dumbledore nodded. If you are to be a part of this night, even as a stranger, then I would like to know what to call you. Toji was quiet for a long moment. Then, like he was paying a small fee to keep the job clean, he said, Toji. Hermione's eyes widened. Toji Fushiguro, he added, flat. Harry felt the name settle in his mind like a hook, a real person, not just the wandless man. Snape watched Toji like the name was another clue to file away. Dumbledore nodded. Thank you, Toji. Toji didn't respond. He simply stepped out the window and vanished into the night. The crack in the wards felt like a thin spot in the air. Toji could feel it without magic. He felt it with his skin, the way the world pressed differently near Old Stone. He crouched behind a tree and watched the forest line. He saw shapes moving in the dark. Not animals. People who wanted to be unseen. Toji's hand rested on his chain. His breathing stayed slow. Then a voice drifted out, smooth as oil. Toji Fushiguro. Toji didn't move. A figure stepped forward into moonlight. Not Voldemort. Someone else. A messenger. A Death Eater in a fine mask, posture proud. Behind him, more masked figures waited. And behind them, like the night itself had learned to breathe, Dementors drifted. The messenger held his hands out like he was offering a gift. My master knows what you are, he said. A man above their weak rules. A man who can cut what they cannot touch. Toji's eyes stayed flat. Talk faster. The Death Eater smiled under the mask. You want a door home. Toji didn't answer. The Death Eater continued anyway. My master can open doors. He can show you the way back. He can give you freedom from this child's school and its slow old man. Toji stepped out from behind the tree. The Death Eaters tensed. Wands lifted. Toji stopped at a safe distance. And the leash? The messenger's smile widened. No leash. Only a simple exchange. Toji's eyes narrowed. Sure. The messenger's voice turned silkier. Bring us the boy. A beat of silence. Then Toji laughed once. Not a happy laugh. A short, dry sound. You think I'm an idiot, Toji said. The messenger's voice stayed calm. You are a professional. He is the target. You do work. We pay. Toji tilted his head slightly. You said no leash. The messenger held his hands up. It is not a leash. It is a job. Toji's gaze slid past him to the Dementors. Your job comes with pets, Toji said. The messenger's tone hardened. Don't insult them. Toji's eyes sharpened. Don't tell me what to say. The air tightened. In the distance, a branch creaked. Toji didn't look. He knew who was watching from farther back. Snape, probably. Maybe Dumbledore, too. Keeping distance. Keeping options. The messenger took one step forward. Last offer, he said. The boy. And you leave this world. Toji's voice stayed flat. You can't promise that. The messenger's smile faded. My master can. Toji stared at him. Then Toji's hand moved. The chain snapped out like a strike of lightning, wrapping around the messenger's wrist before his wand could rise. Toji yanked, hard. The messenger flew forward, mask cracking against a stone. Toji didn't kill him. He didn't need to. He wanted a message delivered. He crouched over the man, close enough to speak into his ear. "Tell your master," Toji said softly, "I don't deliver kids. I deliver bodies." Then he let go. The messenger gasped, scrambling back. Death Eaters fired at once. Spells lit the forest like a broken storm. Toji moved through it. He didn't run straight. He zigzagged, using trees, using dips in the ground. He leapt over a curse that scorched the grass. He rolled under another that shattered bark above his head. A Death Eater tried a wide binding spell, flooding the space between trees with glowing lines. Toji jumped onto a trunk, sprinted along it, and dropped behind the caster before the spell could reset. One chop to the shoulder. The wand fell. The Death Eater screamed. Toji snatched the wand and threw it into the darkness. More spells came. Toji didn't slow. Then the Dementors surged. They glided forward in a black wave, sucking warmth from the air. The forest went quiet in the worst way. Even the Death Eaters backed away from their own allies, leaving space like people did around fire. Toji felt the cold press in. It tried to dig into him, looking for fear to grab. Toji had fear. Everyone had fear. But his fear didn't control his hands. His fear sat deep and quiet, like an old scar. He pulled his blade, and he cut. The first Dementor recoiled, as if stabbed in something real. The second tried to circle him. Toji spun, chain snapping out, anchoring around a tree. He used it to swing, not like a wizard floating, but like a fighter using weight and speed. He slammed into the second Dementor's path and slashed again. The Dementor jerked back with that wet, gasping sound. The Death Eaters stared. One shouted, "He can hurt them!" Toji's voice carried, calm and cruel. "You brought the wrong toys." A curse shot toward Toji's head. He twisted, but the curse clipped his cheek. Heat flashed. Blood ran. Toji didn't wipe it away. He stepped forward, eyes cold. Then the forest behind the Death Eaters erupted with light. A Patronus burst through the trees, bright and strong, charging at the Dementors and forcing them back. Dumbledore stepped into view, wand raised, face calm and terrible. McGonagall appeared beside him, eyes fierce. Snape moved like shadow on the other side, already cutting off escape routes. The Death Eaters hesitated. They didn't want this fight. They wanted Toji alone. And now, Toji wasn't alone. Toji glanced back once, eyes flicking to Dumbledore. Not gratitude, not loyalty. A simple check. "You're here." Dumbledore's voice rang out. "Leave this place." A Death Eater laughed, shaky. "Or what, Headmaster?" Dumbledore's eyes stayed steady. "Or I will end your night." The Death Eater fired. Dumbledore moved his wand in a small arc, and the curse vanished like it had never existed. McGonagall transfigured the ground into a rising barrier, separating students' path back to the castle from the fight. Snape's spell snapped like a whip, disarming 2 Death Eaters at once. Toji watched all of it with a flat face. Then he moved again. He didn't compete with their magic. He complemented it. When McGonagall forced a Death Eater to dodge left, Toji was already there, slamming him into a tree. When Snape's spell pinned a cloak to the ground, Toji stepped in and knocked the wand from the man's hand. When Dumbledore's Patronus drove Dementors back, Toji chased the gap and cut one more time, forcing it to retreat hard. The Death Eaters began to break, not because they were all beaten, because their plan failed. Their trap turned into a 3-sided fight, and the wild card was now cutting the center. A sharp whistle rang from deeper in the forest. A signal. The Death Eaters started to retreat, dragging their wounded, grabbing their wands, backing toward the shadows. The Dementors drifted away with them, still hungry, still wary. Toji took a step to chase, and Snape's voice snapped. "Don't!" Toji paused, eyes narrowing. Snape moved closer, wand still up. "They want you away from the wards," he said. "They want you isolated." Toji stared at him. Snape's expression was cold. "For once, be smart." Toji's lips twitched. "I am smart." Dumbledore's voice came in, calm. "Toji." Toji looked at Dumbledore. Dumbledore's eyes held steady. "This is not the end of tonight. It is the beginning of the next move." Toji stood still for a long beat. Then he exhaled, slow. He let the Death Eaters go, not because he couldn't catch them, because he could see the trap line now. The way a hunter sees thin wire in grass, Dumbledore stepped closer, stopping at a respectful distance. "They offered you a door," he said. Toji's voice was flat. "They offered lies." Snape's eyes narrowed. "And you refused." Toji glanced at him. "They asked me to deliver a kid." McGonagall's face went white with fury. "How dare they?" Toji wiped blood from his cheek with the back of his hand. "Yeah. Annoying." Dumbledore's voice was soft. "You chose." Toji's gaze slid to the dark, where the Death Eaters had vanished. "I chose not to be owned." Snape watched him, still suspicious, but something in his posture eased by a fraction. McGonagall's voice came out sharp. "That doesn't make you good." Toji looked at her. "Never said it did." Dumbledore nodded slowly. "Then we understand each other." Toji turned slightly, like he was already ready to leave the conversation. "Pay," he said. McGonagall made a strangled sound. Dumbledore reached into his robe and pulled out a small pouch. Heavy. Real. He held it out. Toji took it, weighed it, and nodded once. Then Toji looked at Dumbledore again. And the other part. Dumbledore's eyes softened. "Information." Toji nodded. "About doors." Dumbledore's gaze turned distant. "We will keep searching," he said. "And we will do it carefully." Toji's eyes narrowed. "Carefully is slow." "Yes," Dumbledore agreed. "And slow keeps children alive." Toji stared at him for a long moment. Then he turned away, toward the trees. Snape's voice followed him. "Where are you going?" Toji didn't look back. "To work." McGonagall's voice sharpened. "On what?" Toji paused at the edge of shadow. His voice came out flat, like it cost him nothing to say it. "On whoever keeps trying to use kids." Then he vanished into the forest like a cut in the night. The next days felt different, not safe, but different. The Death Eaters did not attack the castle directly again, not right away. They moved in whispers instead. Threats, rumors, quiet pressure on the Ministry. And the Ministry, embarrassed and frightened, stopped pretending it was in control. They doubled Aura patrols. They demanded access to Hogwarts again. Dumbledore refused again. But behind the scenes, the world had adjusted to a new truth. There was now a man in the middle of the war who did not care about slogans. He cared about outcomes. And that made both sides nervous. Harry noticed it first in the halls, not because he saw Toji often. He didn't. Toji stayed out of crowded places. He stayed out of dorm corridors. He stayed away from children unless they were about to die. But Harry noticed what happened around Toji. A rumor spread that the Dementors didn't like him. Another rumor spread that some Death Eaters had vanished near Hogsmeade and were later found tied up, wands gone, masks broken. No one claimed credit. No one saw the attacker clearly. But some people started sleeping with their lights on anyway. Ron tried to joke about it. "Maybe he's billing them," Ron whispered in the library. "Like, 'Dear Dark Wizards, you owe me.'" Hermione glared at him, then whispered back, "He's not doing it for fun." Harry looked down at his book, but didn't read the words. He's doing it because it makes sense, Harry murmured. Hermione nodded slowly. That might be worse. Harry frowned. Why? Hermione's voice was quiet. Because if you're only good when it makes sense, then what happens when being good stops making sense? Harry didn't have an answer. Voldemort did not rage when he heard the report. He did not throw objects. He did not scream. He became quiet. That quiet was worse than rage. He refused, Lucius said, voice tight. Voldemort's eyes stayed fixed on nothing. Yes, Lucius swallowed. He humiliated my man. Voldemort's gaze slid to Lucius like a blade. Your man humiliated himself by believing he could purchase a storm. Lucius bowed his head, sweating. Voldemort's voice turned thoughtful. So he cannot be bought easily. Fine. He leaned forward slightly. Then we change the offer. Lucius's voice was careful. What offer could tempt him? Voldemort's eyes glittered. Not money, he said. Not ideology. He paused. Certainty. Lucius frowned, confused. Voldemort's smile was thin. He hates being trapped, Voldemort said. He hates being a question mark. He tapped his fingers once. So, we do not offer him a door. Lucius's eyes widened a fraction. Then what? Voldemort's voice dropped to a whisper. We offer him a name. Lucius swallowed. A name? Voldemort's smile sharpened. A truth about himself. A truth about why he can cut what magic cannot. Lucius looked uneasy. But we don't know that. Voldemort's eyes flashed. Then we will learn. He rose, slow and smooth. Bring me what he carried from the ministry, the sphere. Lucius hesitated. He still has it. Voldemort's voice turned cold. If he does, we take it. Lucius bowed. My lord, Dumbledore will protect him. Voldemort's gaze turned sharp. Dumbledore cannot protect everyone. He stepped closer to Lucius until Lucius could feel the threat like heat. Do you understand? Voldemort whispered. Lucius nodded quickly. Yes, my lord. Voldemort's smile vanished. Then go. As Lucius fled, Voldemort turned toward the darkness and spoke to it like it was a living thing. Soon, he murmured. Soon you will choose, Blade. The night the sphere changed hands was not loud. It didn't happen in the Great Hall. It didn't happen with banners and speeches. It happened the way real war happened. Quiet, sharp, fast. Toji was moving through a narrow path near Hogsmeade when he felt it. Not footsteps, not breath. A wrongness in the air. He stopped. The trees around him looked normal. Then the ground under his foot shimmered. A trap. Magic surged upward like invisible ropes, trying to lock his ankles. Toji moved anyway. He jerked his foot free, skin scraping as the magic tightened too late. Then spells came from 3 sides at once, not random curses. Coordinated. Silent. Clean. Aurors. No masks. No Death Eaters. This was the Ministry. Toji's eyes narrowed. Idiots! An Auror shouted, Stand down! Toji didn't answer. He ran. He cut left, then right, forcing them to adjust. He used trees as cover. He used darkness. But these Aurors had learned from the last time. They didn't aim for his chest. They aimed for space. They flooded areas. They blocked routes. A wide net of light flashed ahead. Toji skidded, then vaulted over it. A second net flashed above, timed to catch him midair. Toji twisted, grabbed a branch, and swung under it like a gymnast. He landed, rolled, and kept moving. The Aurors were good. Toji was better. Still, he could feel the circle closing. Not because he was tired, because magic could do something speed couldn't fix. It could fill the world. Then a new cold slid through the air. Not Aurors, not Ministry, Dementors. Toji's eyes snapped toward the dark. They were gliding in, drawn by fear and chaos, but also guided. Someone had brought them. Someone had planned this. Toji's jaw tightened. He reached for the sphere in his pocket and found empty space. His eyes narrowed, sharp as a blade. While the ministry kept him moving, someone had cut his pocket. Someone had stolen the sphere. Toji's calm cracked for the first time in a way that mattered. Not anger. Focus. He stopped running. The oars skidded, confused. Toji turned and looked straight into the dark between trees. "Come out," he said, voice low. A masked figure stepped forward, smooth and confident. Lucius Malfoy. He held the glass sphere like it was delicate, like it was priceless. Toji stared at him, face flat. "You." Lucius smiled. "Mr. Fushiguro," he said, voice polite. "We finally meet properly." Toji's eyes moved to the Dementors behind him, then to the oars around him. "You set up a three-way mess," Toji said. Lucius's smile tightened. "A necessary one. I needed you distracted." Toji took one step forward. Aurors raised wands. "Stop!" Toji didn't stop. Lucius lifted the sphere slightly. "My master wishes to speak with you." Toji's eyes went cold. "Tell your master to speak to my blade." Lucius's smile faded. "It doesn't have to be violent." Toji's voice was flat. "Everything has to be violent with you people." A Dementor surged toward the nearest Auror, hungry for the fear. The Auror screamed and fired a Patronus too late. The chaos snapped open. Toji moved. He didn't chase Lucius in a straight line. That would be stupid. That's what traps wanted. Instead, he cut the circle. He sprinted toward the oars and smashed through them like a wedge. He knocked one wand aside. He shoved another oar into a tree. He didn't kill. He didn't need to. He needed space. Then he pivoted and launched himself at Lucius. Lucius's eyes widened. He had expected Toji to get bogged down. Toji was already there. Lucius snapped his wand up. Toji slapped the wand hand sideways, hard. The spell went wide and shattered a branch. Toji's other hand clamped around Lucius's wrist, holding the sphere. Lucius hissed, "You don't understand what you're holding." Toji leaned in, eyes dead calm. "I understand leverage." He twisted. Lucius screamed as his wrist bent. The sphere slipped, and a Dementor drifted between them, drawn to Lucius's fear like a magnet. Lucius froze. Toji didn't. Toji cut. His blade sliced into the Dementor's cloak, forcing it back with that wet, gasping recoil. Lucius stumbled away, shaking. Toji grabbed the sphere again, and a wave of magic slammed into the ground between him and Lucius. The earth erupted. Toji leapt back, avoiding flying stone. He looked up. Dumbledore stood at the edge of the path, wand raised, eyes fierce. McGonagall was beside him. Snape was behind, already casting. Dumbledore's voice rang out. "Enough!" Lucius looked relieved for half a second. Then he realized Dumbledore wasn't speaking to Toji. Dumbledore was speaking to everyone. The Aurors froze. The Dementors recoiled. Even Lucius paused, unsure. Toji glanced at Dumbledore, then at the sphere, then at Lucius. Dumbledore stepped forward, eyes locked on Lucius. "You will leave," he said. Lucius forced a smile. "Headmaster!" Snape's voice cut in like a knife. "Drop it." Lucius's eyes flicked to Snape, then back to Dumbledore. His smile stayed, but sweat shone on his skin. Toji didn't wait for speeches. He hurled his chain. It snapped around Lucius's ankle and yanked. Lucius fell hard, face smashing into dirt. The sphere flew from his hand and rolled. Harry would have fumbled it. Hermione would have tried to catch it carefully. Toji simply stepped on it, pinning it in place without breaking it, like a predator pinning prey. Lucius groaned. Toji looked down at him. "You're bad at this." Lucius spat dirt. "My lord will—" Toji crouched. "Your lord can come get it." Then Toji stood and, with a simple motion, kicked Lucius's wand into the grass, where Snape's spell snapped it away. McGonagall's expression was pure fury. Dumbledore's face was calm, but his eyes were hard. Lucius was hauled back by his own people as they retreated into the shadows, not because they were beaten completely, but because their clean plan had turned into chaos again. And Voldemort wasn't here. Not yet. Toji picked up the sphere and slid it back into his pocket. He looked at Dumbledore. "They stole from me." Dumbledore's eyes held his. "Yes." Toji's voice stayed flat. "So the price goes up again." McGonagall looked like she might faint from anger. Snape's mouth tightened, but he didn't argue. Dumbledore sighed softly. "How much, Toji?" Toji stared into the forest, listening to the last of the Dementors drift away. Then he said, "Not money." Dumbledore's brow rose. Toji's eyes were cold. "You want this war clean around kids? Then give me permission." McGonagall snapped. "Permission to do what?" Toji glanced at her. "To hunt your enemy." Snape's eyes sharpened. "You want to become a weapon?" Toji's voice stayed flat. "I already am." Dumbledore's gaze lowered for a moment, like the weight of it pressed on him. Then he looked up again. "If I say yes," he said softly, "you will kill." Toji didn't pretend. "Yes." McGonagall's voice shook. "Albus." Dumbledore raised a hand. "Minerva." He looked at Toji. "And if I say no?" Toji's eyes didn't change. "Then I do it anyway, and you lose control of where it happens." Snape stared at Toji, then at Dumbledore, as if the room itself had narrowed to a knife edge. Dumbledore's voice was quiet. "You are asking me to bless violence." Toji's answer was simple. "I'm asking you to be realistic." A long silence. Then Dumbledore said, "I will not give you a license to murder." Toji's gaze stayed flat. Dumbledore continued, and his voice turned sharper. "But I will ask you to stop those who would harm children, and I will not ask you how you do it, unless I must." McGonagall looked like she had been slapped. Snape's eyes narrowed, but he didn't look surprised. Toji nodded once. "Good," he said. "That's all I needed." Dumbledore's voice stopped him. "And the sphere?" Toji tapped his pocket. "I keep it." McGonagall snapped. "Absolutely not." Toji looked at her. "Make me." McGonagall's wand lifted. Toji's posture shifted by a hair. "Ready." Dumbledore stepped between them, calm but firm. "Minerva," he said again, and this time it was a command. McGonagall's wand lowered, trembling with anger. Dumbledore looked at Toji. "Why keep it?" Toji's eyes stayed cold. "Because it keeps them honest." Dumbledore held his gaze, then nodded slowly. "Then we have a new arrangement," Dumbledore said. Toji's lips twitched. "Call it a contract." Ron would have laughed at that. Dumbledore didn't. He simply said, "Very well." Toji turned and walked into the trees. Snape's voice followed him, low. "If you turn on us," Toji didn't even look back, "then you die." Snape's mouth tightened, but he didn't fire. Because Snape knew. That wasn't a threat. It was a fact. Some things changed after that night. Not loudly. Quietly. Teachers became stricter about students leaving the castle. The Ministry's letters stopped being demands and started being questions. Death Eater raids near Hogwarts slowed, like someone had decided the area was too expensive. And in the shadows beyond the lights, masked men began to vanish. Not all of them. Not enough to end a war, but enough to change how people moved. Voldemort did not stop. He adapted. He began using fewer Dementors near Hogwarts, not because he feared Toji, but because he hated wasting pieces. He moved his plans into places where children were not the bait, but the rumor. He waited. Because Voldemort had one thing Toji didn't. Time. The last night of the term, Hogwarts felt almost normal. Almost. The Great Hall was warm. The ceiling showed stars. Students laughed too loudly, like laughter could push fear away. Harry sat with Ron and Hermione, trying to enjoy the sound. Ron leaned in and whispered, "Do you think he's here right now? Like, behind a curtain?" Hermione elbowed him. "Stop!" Harry didn't smile. He stared at the doors. He didn't know why, but he felt like if he looked away, something important would slip past. Hermione followed his gaze. "You're thinking about him," she said. Harry nodded. "He's not like anyone we've met." Ron made a face. "That's one way to say it." Hermione's voice was quiet. "He's a person who lives by contracts." Harry frowned. "So what happens when the contract ends?" Hermione didn't answer right away. Then she said, "Then we learn what he really wants." Later, when the castle slept, Toji stood on a high roofline where the wind was cold and clean. Below him, Hogwarts looked peaceful. He knew it wasn't. He could feel the wards pulsing. He could sense the castle's living attention, always watching, always trying to decide what he was. Toji didn't like being watched, but he didn't leave. Not yet. He took the glass sphere from his pocket and rolled it across his knuckles once. Then he took out the pouch Dumbledore had paid him with. He weighed it. He wasn't counting coins for fun. He was reminding himself of something simple. In every world, people tried to own power. In every world, money was a language. Toji flipped a coin into the air. It spun under the moonlight. He caught it. Footsteps sounded behind him. Soft, calm. Dumbledore stepped onto the roof, his robe barely moving in the wind. Toji didn't turn fully. "You're up late." Dumbledore's voice was gentle. "So are you." Toji snorted. "I don't sleep much." Dumbledore stood at a respectful distance. "I wanted to thank you," he said. Toji's eyes narrowed. "Don't." Dumbledore's face softened. "Very well." They stood in silence for a moment, looking over the dark grounds. Finally, Dumbledore spoke again. "You did not take Voldemort's offer." Toji's voice was flat. "It was bad." Dumbledore nodded. "And you chose to protect a school." Toji's jaw tightened. "I chose not to be used." Dumbledore's eyes stayed steady. "Sometimes those are the same thing." Toji didn't answer. Dumbledore's voice dropped slightly. "Do you believe you will ever go home?" Toji stared out into the night. Then he said, "I don't know." It was the most honest thing he had said since he arrived. Dumbledore nodded slowly, as if he respected that more than any promise. "Then we will keep looking," he said. Toji's eyes stayed cold. Slow. Dumbledore's mouth curved faintly. "Careful." Toji huffed, almost amused. Dumbledore turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing," he said. Toji didn't look at him. Dumbledore's voice was quiet, but it carried weight. "If you ever decide Hogwarts is only a job," he said, "then tell me before you walk away." Toji finally turned his head slightly. "Why?" Dumbledore's eyes were gentle and tired. "Because then I will know how afraid I must be." Toji stared at him for a long moment. Then he looked away again. He didn't promise anything. He didn't soften. He simply said, "Pay on time." Dumbledore let out a small breath that might have been a laugh, then stepped back into the stairwell and vanished into the castle. Toji stood alone again on the roof. He looked at the glass sphere in his hand, then at the coin, then at the dark forest beyond the wards. He didn't feel like a hero. He didn't feel like a villain. He felt like a blade caught between hands that kept reaching for him. Toji flipped the coin one more time. It spun, glittering. He caught it. And in the quiet, he made a choice that wasn't a vow, but was still real. He stayed. For now,